Ah, the delights of living in a community managed by a strata. You think you're buying tranquility, a piece of paradise with minimal rules and peaceful coexistence, but in reality, you're paying a premium to live in a reality show without cameras, where the drama is guaranteed and the characters are so over the top that not even a neighbor's writer would come up with them. That's how I met Karen, or as I like to call her, the Bogan Karen of the strata. Bleached blonde, high-pitched voice, an uncontrollable passion for complaining about everything and everyone, and a natural tendency to believe she's the unelected sheriff of the block. You know that type of person who memorizes the condo regulations as if they were the Ten Commandments? Yep, only she interprets everything however she sees fit. And, spoiler, always in her favor. The story began on a Sunday. Strong sun, perfect weather, clean pool, and a barbecue with friends and family. Everything was going well until, out of nowhere, she appeared. In an apron, broom in hand, and that look that mixes moral judgment with disdain. According to her, the sound of water splashing was bothering her cats. Yes, the cats. Not the neighbors, not herself. The cats. I tried to stay calm. After all, maybe the woman had a real reason. But no. It was just another episode in the saga of Karen and the universal order of things only she understands. And that, my friends, is how the Cold War of the Foam began. A suburban territorial battle that not even the city council could resolve with coffee and biscuits. If you've ever had a Bogan Karen in your path, hit that like button before she reports this video for telling too many truths. It was just another Tuesday. That typical Australian morning, blue sky, eucalyptus scent in the air, and a faint sound of a lawnmower in the background. Of course, there's always someone mowing the lawn around here, even if it hasn't even grown. I was in my backyard, clearing some leaves from the pool, and organizing the inflatable toys the kids had left scattered from the weekend. A flaccid pink flamingo floated lazily back and forth, as if it were as fed up as I was. That's when she appeared again. No warning, no good morning. The Strata Karen. Only this time she took the drama up a notch, dressed in the same flowery apron, which looked like a piece rescued from an 80s thrift shop, and holding a clipboard, as if she were conducting an audit for the Australian tax office. "Hi, are you the one using chemicals in the pool?" I took a deep breath. I already knew that tone. It was the same tone she used when she nitpicked about the number of recyclable bags in someone else's rubbish, or how the neighbors parked their cars. Just the standard chlorine. Same thing everyone uses around here. She then pointed to the water with her chin, as if identifying a crime scene. "My cats are allergic, you know, and I'm pretty sure it's because of the evaporation of those products. You should consider more natural methods." I tried to keep my tone civil. "Look, I'm sorry for your cats, but my pool is treated the way Strata itself recommends. In fact, it's all in the manual." But Karen, oh, Karen doesn't accept a no for an answer. She leaned a bit further into my yard, technically already crossing the boundary, and pulled out her phone. She started taking pictures of the pool, the edge, the barbecue, my dog lying in the shade, completely oblivious to the insanity unfolding. "This is going to the Strata Committee, and if needed, to council too." She said this with the same authority as someone announcing a statement from the Prime Minister. It was almost comical, if it weren't so invasive. Now, dramatic pause here. You know what's even more curious? Karen herself has a pool. One of those inflatable ones which she sets up in the middle of the wooden deck on weekends, fills with the hose, and then drains straight into the drainage system. The same system that's been clogged ever since she decided to plant lavender over the pipes. But apparently, when it's her pool, it's fine. It doesn't affect the cats. It doesn't pollute the air. It doesn't disturb anyone. The irony? She even had the audacity to mention environmental risk when she spoke to me. I almost burst out laughing, but I held it in. By this point it was clear that any giggle would turn into yet another complaint in the next group email from Strata. As she returned to her side, mumbling something about sanitary danger, all I could think was, this wasn't going to end here. The woman was clearly on a mission, and for some obscure reason that mission involved turning my pool into a national security issue. And like any self-respecting Australian, I knew it wasn't the time for a direct confrontation. Not yet. It was time to observe and prepare the ground. Literally. But little did I know that the foam was still going to roll, and it wasn't a metaphor. They say some wars start with gunshots, others with words. Ours started with supermarket liquid soap, probably the cheapest brand with an artificial blue spring scent. It was a Tuesday night, or rather technically it was already Wednesday, 3:17 a.m. to be exact. I know because I checked later on the security camera footage. But hold on, let's take this step by step. The morning after Karen's visit, I woke up early, sun rising, clear sky, galas making a racket in the trees. A typical scene in an Australian suburb. I put on my gym clothes, grabbed my water bottle, and headed straight to the pool area, thinking I'd have a few peaceful minutes of swimming before starting the day. But what I found was a spectacle in itself. The surface of the pool was covered with thick white foam, with small bubbles dancing in the sun as if they were part of a fabric softener commercial. The water, which used to be crystal clear, now looked like the result of a poorly done car wash. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to comprehend whether it was a dream, a prank, or if I had finally lost my mind. But no, it was real. The foam was there, covering everything. Floats, ladder, edge, even the floating thermometer that now looked like an island in a sea of detergent. My first instinct was to run to the dog. And yes, he was fine, sleeping on his back in the shade, as always, completely oblivious to the chemical chaos in the backyard. Then I went to check the security camera positioned above the deck. It's one of those discreet ones that no one notices but has decent night vision. And that's when I saw her. 3:17 a.m. Karen, in a tracksuit, hood covering half of her dyed hair, walking silently along the side of the yard. In her hands, a green bucket and a 2-liter bottle of liquid detergent, the all-purpose kind, with miraculous promises printed on the label. She approached the pool, poured the contents with all the care of someone preparing a magic potion, then swirled the bucket as if she were blessing the water. She finished the ritual with a satisfied look, wiped her hands on her pants, and disappeared back the way she came. I didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or call some comedy show and sell the rights to the story. The woman really invaded my yard to sabotage the pool with soap. Soap? Who does that? On what planet does that seem like a sensible idea? I immediately called the Strata management. The response? A classic Australian. We'll open an incident report. Translation: absolutely nothing is going to happen. No one wants to get involved with a Karen, especially not a Karen who carries the Strata bylaws under her arm and has already threatened to sue a neighbor for looking at her dog too funny. I tried contacting the council. The attendant listened, made a noise like, and said it might be a civil issue, not a criminal one. Apparently pouring soap into someone else's pool at 3 in the morning doesn't fall under the category of a serious offense. Good to know. The neighbors? The neighbors. Total silence. Some made a point of avoiding eye contact as they walked by on the footpath. Others whispered in the WhatsApp group for the Strata, the one I no longer participate in since Karen turned even memes into a reason for a formal complaint. But I received 1 or 2 private messages. One of them said, "I saw everything. She does this because she knows no one will do anything. Hang in there. Hang in there." That's what I needed. Because it wasn't just foam. It was the materialization of provocation. A symbolic, ridiculous, but effective attack. She wanted to destabilize me, to push me into the role of the hysterical crazy of the Strata, the one everyone avoids and pretends is the problem. But, you see, I'm Australian. I grew up watching Home and Away, listening to countless versions of Waltzing Matilda, and learning that when the ground starts shaking, you don't run away, you face it. And if Karen wanted war, she was going to find out that in backyard wars, whoever controls the drainage wins. And that's how I began to plan my revenge. And, my friends, nothing is more Australian than giving back in kind. But with a touch of irony, improvised hydraulic engineering, and a sharp sense of humor. Every successful act of revenge starts with something simple, a good observation. And after the soap attack, or as I lovingly began to call it, the night of the bubbles, I started observing, silently, like a suburban ninja with a sense of justice and unrestricted access to Bunnings warehouse. I began analyzing the terrain. Literally, I noticed that Karen's house, due to a grotesque landscaping error, or pure ironic fate, sat at a subtly lower level than my yard. Nothing too dramatic, a slight slope, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but enough for rainwater to flow towards her side garden during heavier rains. Now, here's the interesting part. Months earlier, she had dug an improvised channel between our fences to improve soil drainage, as she said in one of the Strata meetings. The truth? She wanted the rainwater that accumulated in her yard to drain faster. And guess where? Exactly. Through my downpipe. Well then, with that information in hand, I went to my drainage pump, one of those that are built into modern pools, and made a slight redirection. An extra tube, quite discreet, was installed. Nothing extravagant, just enough so that when the drainage was activated, the water would flow straight into the channel dug by Karen. The irony is that she dug the path to her own ruin. I chose a sunny Saturday, right after yet another useless visit from Strata, which had ended with a classic phrase of institutional omission. We hope both parties can find an amicable solution, as if I had poured soap into my own pool at 3 a.m. Anyway, I turned on the pump, slowly, no rush. The water started to drain, first in silence, then with that delightful sound of a gentle current, which only those who have drained a pool understand. The residual foam, still present, danced at the end of the pipe like a cascade of poisoned cotton candy, and it flowed, curve after curve, edging around the yard boundary, crossing the channel, and heading straight for Karen's lawn. I sat with an iced coffee on the porch and watched the scene like it was the final of Australian Ninja Warrior. The foam invaded the edges of the fence. Then it covered the decorative stone. And then, with the inevitability of a train off the tracks, it reached the heart of her garden, the one she always claimed was a sanctuary for cats. The first appearance of Karen happened 12 minutes later. She walked out the back door wearing a moss-green fluffy robe, with the word "blessed" embroidered on the back, ironically, and flip-flops, already soaked. She didn't immediately understand what was happening. She stood there for about 5 seconds, staring at the foam. Then she ran to the hose, which looked more like a useless thread of hope. As she tried to rinse the garden with jets of water, she shouted disconnected phrases like, "environmental pollution," and "I'm going to sue you, you lunatic." And the best part, all this while slipping on her own wet tiles, nearly face-planting into a fern pot. The cherry on top? The dog from my neighbor across the street, Spud, a lazy staffy who hates Karen with all his might, started barking rhythmically, as if cheering for the foam. He barked, paused, looked, and barked again. I swear he nearly smiled. By this point, the foam was already covering a good third of her lawn. And it wasn't just any foam. It was that memory foam that sticks to everything. The tiles, the leaves, the plastic garden furniture she never cleaned. Karen saw me sitting there. She shouted something that sounded like, "I know it was you," but it was hard to hear over the noise of the pump and the gallas mocking the situation from high in the trees. I, with the calmness of someone just minding their own business, took a sip of my coffee and replied, "You dug the channel yourself, remember? This is just natural drainage." She huffed, slammed the gate shut, and went inside. For a second I thought she was going to call the police, but I think even she realized there wasn't exactly a crime in letting the pool water drain through a path she created herself. I just gave a little help. The day ended with the sun reflecting off the remnants of the foam slowly drying on her plants. I slept like a log that night. What did I learn? In a strata war, never underestimate the power of improvised hydraulic engineering, and always, always pay attention to gravity. Sunday night. A group email pinged in my inbox with the subject line in capital letters, "Extraordinary Strata Meeting, Urgent Matter," and there she was. The official summons from the little UN of suburban Australians, our beloved, inefficient, and perfectly useless Strata Committee. The location, as always, would be in the garage of the building across the street, where the vice president, Bob from 2B, kept a folding table, a few plastic chairs, and a bucket of water with reusable cups, because we need to reduce plastic use, but not too much. The perfect setting for an informal trial where everyone pretends to be impartial, but has already taken sides before the first sip of tea. I arrived early. Karen was already there, of course, robe swapped for a tropical print blouse, clearly out of season, and a pressed beige pant that screamed, "Respectable community lady." Next to her, her inseparable clipboard, now stuffed with papers and printed photos of the foam, the lawn, and, believe it or not, the tube of my drainage pump. CSI-level photography. She violated someone else's space, contaminated community soil, and caused stress to my pets. That's how Karen opened her speech. No beating around the bush, no shame, and with the tone of someone who believes she's about to receive a Citizen of the Year award. The attendees exchanged glances, some with neutral expression, others trying to hide their sadistic pleasure at witnessing this live. Then it was my turn. I stood up, looked at the faces watching me, faces that, under other circumstances, only greeted me with a rushed morning, and played my trump card. I have the recordings from my security camera, including the night when Karen entered my yard and poured soap into my pool. Silence. Even Bob from 2B choked on his tea. I grabbed my tablet, connected it to the Strata's portable projector, which no one had known how to operate until then, and, with a tap, the image appeared. Karen, with bucket and detergent, invading my space like a malicious ninja. The murmurs began. Julie from 3C let out an "oh dear," while Dave, the retired Strata manager, scratched his head and muttered something like, "This is going to be a hassle." Karen, of course, tried to justify herself. She said she was misinterpreted, that she might have been just trying to wash the footpath. A footpath that, curiously enough, is located inside my yard. Bob took a deep breath and declared what we all knew he would say. "Look, everyone, the Strata does not have the authority to impose formal sanctions in this case, but we strongly recommend that the parties involved keep their distance and avoid further conflict." The Strata's favorite phrase, "we strongly recommend." Translation: we don't want to get involved. It's the adult equivalent of a supervisor saying, "Sort it out among yourselves." Karen turned red, literally. Not out of shame but from repressed anger. She grabbed her clipboard, gathered her papers with the same drama as a wronged lawyer, and stormed out, heels clattering on the concrete. No one tried to stop her. After her exit, Bob cleared his throat. "Does anyone want to talk about the community roof gutter? It's leaking." And just like that, as if nothing had happened, the meeting continued. The foam scandal became a bygone item, quickly replaced by complaints about poorly sorted rubbish and badly parked bicycles. I went home with a mix of relief and disbelief. Justice didn't come through official hands, but it came, cynically, indirectly, typical of any community where everyone coexists but no one truly loves one another. And there, in the back of my mind, I knew Karen wasn't going to let it go. The woman was stubborn, and in the unwritten manual of Bogan Karens, revenge is a sacred right. For a few weeks, I thought I had won. The foam dried, Karen's lawn showed signs of recovery, and she wasn't seen roaming around with her inseparable clipboard. It almost seemed like the world had righted itself. A grave mistake. Like any good Karen, she merely retreated into the tall grass of frustration, preparing to strike with what she knows best: gossip, defamation, and misinformation campaigns worthy of a school election. It all started discreetly. An A4 sheet stuck to the common bin on the block. "Attention residents, excessive use of chemicals in households can cause serious environmental damage." Complete with graphs pulled from some obscure website and the town council logo cut out and glued on. Poorly aligned, like a rushed school project. No one signed the notice, but everyone knew where it came from. The next day, more appeared. One at the entrance of the garage, another near the playground, and even one at the entrance of the neighboring building, where no one uses the pool. But apparently, Karen thought she could expand her educational campaign. Then came the flyers, folded in 3 parts, with alarmist texts about chlorine poisoning and the impact of artificial bubbles on urban wildlife. A true environmental treatise, written with solemn words and catchy phrases like, "Did you know that excess foam can confuse migratory birds?" The last straw, however, came the following Saturday. I woke up to a strange noise, the kind of sound you only hear when something isn't where it should be. Upon opening the back door, there it was, an inflatable figure floating in the pool. Not a fun floaty. It was a humanoid mannequin, like those from clothing stores, wearing diving goggles and a sign around its neck. "Save the imaginary fish." I confess, it took me a few seconds to process, and when I understood, I had to sit down from laughing so hard. The woman actually bought, or stole, I wouldn't doubt it, a mannequin, and tossed it into my pool with a handwritten ecological protest. I shared the photo in the friends group and laughed for days. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't just a tantrum. It was an attempt to make me look ridiculous, to turn me into the problematic neighbor. And in Australian suburbs like mine, being labeled as difficult is worse than an imposed fine. Karen continued with small weekly provocations. One day she left bags of dry leaves at the entrance of my garage, claiming they must have come from your yard. Another time she played gospel music loudly at 7 in the morning on a Sunday. And it wasn't even Hillsong, it sounded like an off-key choir of electronic monks. The most ironic part? Every time she did something, she seemed more desperate. It was as if she were trying to regain control of the narrative, showing the neighbors that she was still the moral guardian of the neighborhood. But the truth is, no one took her seriously anymore. Even Julie from 3C, who used to cover for Karen out of social convenience, commented to me at the supermarket, "She needs a hobby, like gardening or Tai Chi. This leafleting over foam has gone too far." And that's where the beauty of suburban karma comes in. Karen, so used to manipulating her surroundings, didn't realize that little by little, she was losing the support of the neighborhood. With each exaggeration, a new person rolled their eyes. With each crazy complaint, fewer people showed up at Strata meetings. She became a caricature of herself. For my part, I decided not to react. Not directly. I just let the bizarre things happen, retrieved the mannequin from the pool, recycled the flyers, and went about my life with a slight smile on my face. Because in the end, what irritates a Karen the most isn't being contradicted, it's being ignored. And there was still one last chapter in this story, because the universe, when it wants to be poetic, goes to great lengths. A few weeks passed since the peak of the bubble crisis and the activist mannequin incident. Spring arrived, the birds started singing again, and Karen, well, Karen continued to be Karen. But something changed, not exactly in her but around her. The neighborhood was now observing her actions with a certain comedic distance, as if she had become a sort of mascot of chaos. Even the new residents, a young couple just moved in from rural Queensland, had been informally warned, "If you hear shouting before 8 in the morning, don't worry. It's just Karen trying to educate the neighborhood." It was in this new climate of passive, ironic coexistence that I decided to install a solar panel system on the roof. Nothing too fancy. Sustainability, energy savings, and the bonus of knowing it would deeply irritate someone who defines herself as anti-reflection and pro-closed curtain. And sure enough, 2 days after the installation, I received a scribbled note in red pen, carefully stuck in the mailbox. "The light reflecting off your solar panels is disturbing my morning meditation. I hope you consider covering them." Morning meditation. The same woman who yelled at rodents and evangelized cats every other morning. I ignored it, of course, and the panels remain there, beautiful and gleaming, contributing clean energy and a little sparkle right into Karen's window. But the universe, that great sarcastic screenwriter, decided to give me one more little gift. A few houses down, a new neighbor moved in. Single, in his 40s, sculpted mustache, and a strong opinion on the proper place to put rubbish bins. On the third day he argued with Julie from 3C about the position of the community dish rack in the outdoor laundry. I just watched, with a cup of tea in hand, as Karen and the new neighbor met on the sidewalk. Tense smiles, exchange of glances, and then the distant sound of a conversation laden with phrases like, "We need to maintain the standards of this neighborhood." At that moment I understood. The cycle renews itself. The universe doesn't give a point without a knot. Where there's a Karen, there's always the risk of a Darren emerging, an equally inconvenient male version, a backyard inspector, and self-proclaimed defender of good morals. Today, my pool is clean. The foam is gone. The dog is still sleeping in the same corner of the porch, and I continue living my life normally, with the calmness of someone who has learned the art of the silent counterattack. The lesson? Sometimes it's not about winning the fight. It's about overcoming boredom, about turning the absurdity of everyday life into great stories. Because deep down, those who have never had a Karen around may not know the true taste of a small victory. And for you who have followed this suburban epic so far, I ask you, what was your biggest neighborhood drama? Comment down below with the hashtag #TeamFoam, because if life gives you soap, you already know. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and share this video with that friend who lives near a Karen. Or better yet, with the Karen herself. Who knows, she might learn something. Or at the very least, it could become content for the next episode. After all, in this neighborhood, peace is temporary, but sarcasm is eternal.